Not long ago, I was talking to a longtime friend. I've learned not to say an old friend. I'm not supposed to say that. A longtime friend from college, and she told me that she no longer watches the news, that she used to wake up each morning and to turn it on while she was making coffee, and she said that now she just keeps it off. She said there's just too much. Too many wars, too many fires, too many voices crying out. It's not that I don't care. It's just that, she said, I can't look anymore. And I understood. Maybe you do too. Because the world is full of suffering. It can feel like standing in smoke, eyes stinging, chest a little tight, unable to breathe. And so perhaps, like my friend, like me sometimes too, perhaps you turn away, cover your eyes, and let it just disappear. But this week's Torah portion begins with a command that pierces that instinct. Re'eh anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. See, I set before you today blessing and curse. I got stuck on that word, see. Perhaps it's because my nephew, my 2-year-old nephew, is in our house, and I've been thinking about the game peekaboo. Because peekaboo was a game in childhood. We covered our eyes, and we believed that we sort of had become invisible, even though our giggles, for sure, would give us away. But in the Torah, covering your eyes is no game. Later in Deuteronomy, Moses insists that if you see your fellow's ox or sheep gone astray, to not ignore it. You must not remain indifferent. And the Hebrew word translated as ignore literally means to hide yourself, to not cover your eyes, to not disappear. Moses knew the truth that when we choose not to see, we somehow vanish from the world of moral responsibility. When we pretend to not notice, we slip out of the story. We disappear not only from each other, but also from ourselves. And yet, how can we not look away? How do we stay present when the ache is constant? When the suffering seems to be not just hypothetical, but hourly? When people crying out are not just abstractions, but they're neighbors and children and strangers who carry our same humanity. The Torah does not ask for simplicity. It asks for presence. It asks for courage. It asks for practice. Because Judaism is rooted in the power of attention. We proclaim faith in an invisible God. We trust in unseen things. The love that we cannot touch, the freedom that we cannot measure, the compassion that we cannot paint. Invisible and also real, present and weighty. And when God calls to Moses from the burning bush, God doesn't open up with theology. God says, I have seen the suffering of my people, and I have heard their cries. This, I want to suggest, is the work of holiness. To see. The work of holiness is to hear. It is to stay awake. But this world gives us every excuse to close our eyes and to disappear. And for some, disappearing is survival. For others, disappearing is a privilege. To say, this isn't my issue, or someone else will take care of it. And the Torah, interestingly, has very little patience for it. Because that's why again and again, the Torah draws suffering close. It shrinks the space between responsibility and relationships. When it commands us to not harvest every last grape or every last olive, to not pluck the field bare, it's not just an agricultural policy. It's a way of structuring life so that we see the vulnerable, that we take care of the vulnerable, so that their need brushes up against our plenty, so that we cannot pretend that they don't exist. Now, one of Torah's most tender commands, I think, captures this idea perfectly. When someone gives you a blanket as a collateral for a loan, the Torah tells us that you cannot keep it overnight. You must return it before sundown. And the text adds, you must not sleep in the person's pledge. Let me be clear about that. In other words, there might be someone who is poorer, and the only pledge that they might be able to give is the blanket that they use to sleep in at night, or sleep under at night. And what the Torah is telling us is to not rest in comfort when someone else is cold. Don't close your eyes to another person's need. Don't pretend to just not see. And years ago, I spoke with a congregant who had just lost her husband. And she told me about the day after the funeral that she needed to actually go to the grocery store, and it had been the first time in a long time. And she said it felt like she was walking through fog, completely invisible, that no one had really understood or known what she had just gone through. And then she said that someone from Temple Bethel saw her, literally saw her. They came over. They put a hand on her shoulder, and they said, "I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm thinking of you." And she told me it was the first moment that she felt like she could breathe again, because she realized she wasn't invisible. That is the power of presence. That is the holiness of bringing our attention to someone else. And so many of you have already lived this way, because I see it all the time in the way that you bring meals to one another, or that you call to check in, or how people show up when someone is hurting. These small acts of seeing are what make our community strong. But Torah also knows the danger if we close our eyes for too long from the suffering of many. At first, looking away feels like protection, like catching our breath. But if we stay hidden, something begins to slip. And we don't just disappear. We start shrinking one another into categories and into labels. We begin to see neighbors as strangers. Perhaps we see fellow Jews as opponents. Perhaps suspicion grows that fractures deepen and the bonds that make us resilient somehow begin to fray. And I think that's the danger in our world right now, in our country right now. How outrage is contagious, that distrust spreads quickly, that Jews turn on one another. And history teaches us that when we do, we become even more vulnerable. But I don't think that all of this is inevitable. We're not powerless. The health and vitality of Jewish life, of life in our country, rests in our very ability to choose differently, to resist reducing one another to a single opinion or a single moment to keep showing up as blessings, to see one another, even when it's hard. Because the truth is that no one else will care for us like we can care for one another. No one. And there are going to be moments when we must look away. There's going to be moments when we can't keep caring at all. And that's human. But the danger is staying hidden too long, in convincing ourselves that we're not needed, because we are. And so our Torah portion says, open your eyes. Open your heart. Because someone right now needs to be seen. And maybe that someone is you. Shabbat Shalom.